Halloween Haunt is known for its haunted houses, its creepy atmosphere, its scare zones, and its shows. Let's talk about my top 5 favorite Halloween Haunt shows. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about. So, Ryan, live entertainment or dead entertainment, whatever way you want to look at it, at Halloween Haunt, you have some favorite shows from the history of this event. First of all, what is it about the entertainment at Halloween Haunt that you really enjoy?
So sometimes this is true now and sometimes it's not, but it's not as true as it was like 10 years ago. But I do like how it's a little bit edgy. During the season, you come in and you know that it's going to be nerfed, and it's specifically designed that nobody gets their feelings hurt and nobody gets offended and stuff. But with Hans, especially for about a decade there, it was kind of like, let's see how many people we can offend without getting sued. So there are a lot of good shows. I have my top 5 here. Some of them are a little bit more recent, believe it or not, and I think that my number 1 is going to be a little controversial, but let's start with number 5. This is
number
my
5
favorite.
Your 5th favorite show of all time, right? Of all time.
During Haunt, yeah.
Okay.
We're talking about Ghouls Gone Wild, the show that is making its return this year. I really like this because it had some of the best costumes. It's a book report essentially. It's a bunch of different songs that are played together. It doesn't tell like a very complex story or anything, but it went over really well, and it was a really cool alternative to the other show that was in the Showplace when this was going. There's a couple different shows in the Showplace, but this had a decently long run, and this show's making its return this year. So it's a whole new audience that gets to check it out, and it'll be new to them.
It is. What you mentioned, the costumes. I thought those were fantastic during the years they had Ghouls Gone Wild. Hopefully it's the same costumes again this time around. I thought the song selection, very familiar songs to everybody in the audience. It's high energy. So I like that about it. So I'm glad to see that it's back, and it would certainly make my top 5 if I had to pick 5 shows. What's next?
Certainly. And then the next one I chose is Nightwalkers. So this is Nightwalkers, the 2022 edition. So 2023 was good. It wasn't top 5 good though. So Nightwalkers, for those of you who don't know, is I wouldn't really call it a stunt show. I don't like how they call it that, but it's dancers, it's like circus acts, kind of like acrobatic acts, as well as rollerbladers and bikers and stuff. But the thing that's really going to win me over with most shows is if it has a story. This one had a very loose story of a girl that was she and her boyfriend were being attacked by zombies, and they get chased into the venue, and then there's kind of a love triangle and stuff. I thought this was awesome, and the energy was incredible. I probably watched this like 15, 20 times in 2022. They came out with a new one in 2023. I think hats off to them, like mazel tov to them for making it different from one year to the next. I just didn't feel like it was as good. The show is coming back for 2024, so it remains to be seen. But yeah, 2022 Nightwalkers, that was one of my favorite shows. You got to see this one, didn't you?
I did. I enjoyed it. Maybe doesn't make my top 5 of all time. It was entertaining. I thought it was a little hard to follow the storyline, till I saw it, several times in. Then you kind of figure it out a little bit. Maybe I'm just a little slow. I don't know, but it was good. Like I said, it's good energy to it, entertaining. I like that it was an outdoor venue. I think that added to it, especially as the fog and that would, kind of gather around International Street right there by the theater. Adds a little bit more of a, element to it. But, good show. We're checking out this year.
Yeah, certainly. And 2023, again, it wasn't a top 5, but wasn't as good. It was still a great show though. And that's the cool thing about it. Like they closed Hot Blooded, which was a long running one, and they brought in Homecoming Haunt. It's something just stupid. And everyone was super disappointed. And then they brought this back, and it was like, oh, okay. This is kind of cool. Doing Halloween versions of normal shows usually doesn't sit well with me. But this one worked. It worked very, very well.
Yeah, it
So
does.
speaking of Halloween shows, or doing the Halloween version of shows they did during the season, here's another exception: Ed Alonzo's Psycho Circus of Magic and Mayhem. So
Number 3, right?
that is number 3 on my list. So this is in 2013. So Ed did his show in 2013, and then he came back for Haunt. And I assume when he came back for Haunt, it was going to be like, I knew they advertised it as edgier, and maybe there was like a boob that the general public couldn't handle, maybe an F word in there. This dude took the show in a completely different direction. It was like dirty jokes, like toilet humor. He was adversarial with the audience. He would say stuff that's very not politically correct. I thought it was amazing. What do you think of this one?
I loved Ed Alonzo's Psycho Circus of Magic and Mayhem when it was there in 2013. Very entertaining. You did not know what he was going to say show to show sometimes. I think that added an extra element to it. I think the fact that he involved the audience was good. You sit up close. You could definitely be a target at the show. But a name like Ed Alonzo, I mean, it gave Haunt like a headliner.
Yes.
So when you went there, if you maybe weren't interested or thinking about watching shows, because that's not the first thing on anybody's mind when you're coming to Halloween Haunt. You're thinking the mazes, the scare zones, the rides, the food, and then, oh yeah, there's some entertainment. When it's the entertainment's right there with everything else. But he gave it the headliner, so you heard of Ed Alonzo, so you're like, oh, we got to go check this out. This could be pretty good. And, the crowds were normally, pretty good in the Kings Island Theater for this. He had a nice following, so you saw kind of, I don't use the word cult following because it wasn't around long enough to have that, but, it built as each night of Haunt went on. And by the end of it, you had 150, 200 people that were kind of regulars for this show. So I thought that was great too, that it, again, the headliner gave Haunt a little bit of an identity, that it was edgy. Wasn't your normal, summer night at the park with a show like this. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I loved it too, and I remember when they first announced the original like Ed Alonzo show earlier this season, and I was like, why do I know that name? And I ended up Googling him. Oh, he was on Saved by the Bell. He played Max, and I was on KI Central, and I was saying like, you guys don't know what you're in for, because like this is going to be both nostalgia and a magic show. So
I remember you sending me a text when you heard he was going to be at Kings Island. You said, Ed Alonzo, you think you're going to be able to do anything with that? I was the PR person at the time, and I was like, Brian, yes, I'll be able to do a lot with this. And we had him on morning shows.
Mm-hmm.
He did the circuit in Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, so we got him out there. And it worked several times because the show was different during the fall, so you could repeat that and get him on those same stations again in the fall. So yeah, he was as a PR person. I mean, he was what you want. He gave you that that name recognition. That you could number one, to come out and see Ed Alonzo, but number two, for the media, here's an opportunity for you to come out and talk to Ed Alonzo about his show and his career.
Yeah, and the cool thing about him is, we talked about, you never knew what he was going to say and stuff, but he was very disciplined though. So it wasn't like with Robbie Knievel when the producer had their hand over the censor button. Like, you take him on Fox 19, he can do a great family-friendly thing on Fox 19, and then that night you can take him to perform at Halloween Haunt, and he can drop an F-bomb in there or make a racially insensitive comment, as he did a couple times.
He did. But I mean, it's I don't know if he would work in the world that that park lives in now, in terms of how they want to do the event or whatever. But he's been at Knott's, he's been at a couple of the other parks. I want to say he was at Worlds of Fun for 1 year.
Yes.
But he's he's certainly somebody that was a headliner, and I think you kind of need something like that when you have an event like Halloween Haunt. There's got to be that headline, whether it's a show like it is with Ed Alonzo, or it's got to be that attraction that everyone's talking about. So he gave you that carrot that you needed to get everyone talking about Halloween Haunt, because everyone was talking about Ed Alonzo in his show.
Yeah, and I love the people that make the argument of like, because Haunt really, really needs a show in the Kings Island Theater. And this right here proves that, like, oh, they use that for makeup. They can do that somewhere else. This proves it. They've done shows in there. Paramount did shows in there. They don't want
Yeah.
to pay for it is the problem. But the thing is, if Haunt's going to draw 30, 40,000 people per night, and it's like 6 people per square foot, you need more stuff to do. If there's less houses, then something like this would be an incredible use of resources. But anyway, let's go on to the next one. This would probably be most people's number one. I put Hot Blooded at number 2. Hot Blooded succeeded the first show that was in the theater, which we'll obviously talk about later. But very good. It's a jukebox musical storyline about a guy and a girl lost in a cave, accosted by vampires. Eventually, I believe the girl got bitten, and then she comes back out dressed as you can see on your screen. And
Yes.
Ultimately, I guess the way I always interpreted the ending is because she climbs in the coffin. No, she stabs what does she do? She runs off stage, but one of the male vampires got stabbed. Remember, it had that like comical squirt of blood, and then they would climb in the casket with him and slam it shut as the fireworks went off.
Yeah.
So I guess it is kind of inconclusive, but still, like, great story. They had that water wall feature where they could put effects in droplets of water. If you're looking at the screen, then right above the girl in the middle's head is you can kind of see like that looks like a blood drop that's actually water drop down. Unfortunately, the last like year or two of the show, they got a new set which did not include that. So that took a lot away from the show. But what about a 15-year run for this or so, Don?
On again, off again, from 2009 on. I think it had, where it was gone for a year, then it came back for a couple more years. But immensely popular show.
Mm-hmm.
It was not your everyday, Kings Island show. You would see some, the families that would come in, early on in the show. They would get up and leave just because of, I don't know, the costumes, the suggestive, things that were going on in that. So, and there was that disclaimer beforehand that it was intended for mature audiences. But, we mentioned with Alonzo, cult following, it certainly developed that over the years. I mean,
certainly. And it's still missed to this day. In fact, my leader at work, hi, Chris, I know you listen, was telling me that he wished they would bring the show back. And he's a Kings Island fan, but he's no like fanboy.
Well, it's kind of like taking out a popular ride, wasn't it? When the show went away, it was it's missed. It was part of that Haunt identity. It told you that this event was edgy, and that's kind of lost now. It doesn't have that edgy feel to it. And one of the reasons is you don't have shows like Ed Alonzo or Hot Blooded anymore.
Yeah. So Hot Blooded, that is my number 2. So I want to discuss some honorable mentions with you. One that I feel like might be something that people forget, but it was a show that I hated, was Skeleton Crew. And I so badly wanted to like that show because it was from the Hot Vol Productions. So we had Cirque Imagine, which was an amazing show. And then that was one of those like, oh, let's do that, but Halloween. And it just did not work. It was so
did not
boring.
work. I think the venue was a problem being outside like that.
I think that was part of it.
Yeah. So that didn't work, but no, that was, it's an honorable mention. I mean, there were those that really enjoyed that show.
Yeah. There was like 3 people that really liked that show. It lasted 1 year and then Hot Blooded came back. Haunted Homecoming is another show that was in that venue. Anyway, the next show,
of all the haunt shows that the park has done over the years, that's one of them.
That was one of them. It certainly was. It was in that venue. Monsters Rock, I feel like I'm undercrediting, but I'm so tired of it.
Solid show.
But it's, you have a show so long that's not like something that's particularly excellent, like Hot Blooded, and it almost drains on you, where a show that is good, and after 10 years, it's kind of like, I hate that show. Because you even your favorite episode of your favorite TV show, you just like, I do not want to watch that on streaming right now. What was the show? I was trying to think of the name of the show and I couldn't find it, but the one that was on the bandstand in 2022. It had dancers and it replaced like Blood Drums.
I like Blood Drums. I'm at a loss for the name too, Ryan. But Blood Drums, I really like that. And they had like the Fire Girl and all that kind of stuff. That was cool.
So
you almost had to be up close though to see it with all the stuff, because they had
yeah,
kind of like gated off a little bit. But if you were up close and you got to see, the fire and all the different pyro things, and I thought that was a really well done show. That would push for me to be in the top 5.
yeah, that almost made the top 5 for me. The one that replaced it, which was the Cedar Fair branded Blood Drums, which its name also eludes me. It was the same show, just not Blood Drums. That was better than Blood Drums. I feel like that was when they introduced the fire spinners and stuff, I think. And again, if you were up close, it was fantastic. But well, actually, they did have the girl fire spinner, Crystal,
Right.
or whatever her name is. But they brought in the husband and wife crew, or boyfriend and girlfriend crew, that would do like the fire spitting and the poi and all that stuff. So that was really cool. The trivia thing, I think, is atrocious. Like, that's such a good venue at night, and you're using it for like Doctor Doom's stupid trivia. Yeah, okay. Anyway, enough about them though. So I think
Number
you know
one.
what my number one's going to be. I bet a lot of people that listen to the show never got to see this, but Dead Awakening was one of the greatest shows in Kings Island history.
Well written, like you said, one of the greatest shows. Had a 2-year run, but yeah, this was, I think, when everybody knew that they weren't at Kings Island anymore in the fall when this show debuted. I remember my first haunt RIP party.
Mm-hmm.
I had they dressed us up, so I was dressed like an Undertaker.
Yes.
And just a flood of people going to guest services. They could not believe what they were seeing with Dead Awakening, because this was not Kings Island. They had gone there since 1972. Everything had been so family friendly. This was the first show that was not, and it was very edgy. It was exactly what Cedar Fair wanted at the time, to create that controversy, to get people talking about it, to get people angry about it. People were going to work the next day just so upset about what they saw. It was going to get more people to come check it out, right? So
right.
they wanted it to be like that. So I remember I was up in the International Restaurant, and I was, mingling with the media and that, again, dressed up like an Undertaker. And marketing director comes up and he says, you're needed at guest services because there's a lot of people complaining about hot blood. So I'm down there talking to these families, and everybody else dressed like an Undertaker, talking about the show and getting their feedback and everything. But yeah, this one was certainly at the beginning very controversial, just because it wasn't your typical Kings Island show, but it was so well written. And I think that got lost in the shuffle initially, just because of all the controversy about it. But they had very talented people in there. One of them went on to do like Broadway, and that Josh Hobbs was one of the guys that went on to have a nice career there. But just talented singers, talented dancers. The set looked great. It was just, and you knew that it was a different event than Kings Island when you were there. It was Halloween Haunt, right? So there was a lot to like about this show.
So if you haven't seen the show, I know that shows typically don't translate to video very well, but this is a really good one to check out. But it's called Dead Awakening. So long story short, jukebox musical. This girl wakes up from her nightmare. She's chased by demons and stuff, and it's a guy. You'll see this theme, but guy and a girl demon are kind of a couple. She tries to seduce the guy, and then the girl manipulates all the other little ghoul dancers and stuff. And at the very end, they stab her to death while she's tied to the bed in a very sexual manner, I might add. And the thing that was really cool was that they'd stab her to death, and they would cover her in blood, and then they would just leave her there. So like when you're leaving the venue, she's still laying there dead in the bed on the stage. But
yeah, and that was kind of fun for her when it was, getting toward the end of October and it's like 32 degrees outside for that midnight show. Yeah, that was fun for her to be sitting there on the bed.
I always thought, a lot of these dancers are kind of scantily clad. I guess like in today's world, like when, with Nightwalkers, they dress like zombies, but you could probably like layer up a little bit. If you look at this photo, she's not layered up at all. There's no hiding this stuff. But I always thought like, well, maybe it's a little warmer on the stage because of the lights and stuff. But in today's world, they have LED lighting, which doesn't really get hot. So it's as cold on the
No.
stage as it is in the crowd. But
The other thing too about the outfits, and it was one of the things that I would try to, when I was talking to the parents and that were upset about shows like this, is that the clothing that they wore. I mean, you see less on shows like Dancing with the Stars
sure.
than you did with Dead Awakening or Hot Blooded.
Well, what's funny is a friend of mine who moonlights as a photographer, and he's very involved in all this sort of stuff. But he watched. It was probably the last year of Hot Blooded, and I said like, yeah, the girls in the scantily clad stuff, and he's like, honestly, he's like, I realize that in the Kings Island setting, it seems like they're really scantily clad. He's like, but we do photography sessions with 7-year-old girls who are dancers that are way more scantily clad than that. So it's funny how the standards are different. Well, now granted, like with the whole like dance moms thing, there's plenty of people out there that are like, this is completely inappropriate. But it's not like there's like full frontal nudity or anything like that. It was all, it was a lot more implied than you actually saw. But that rounds up. That's my favorite of all time. I think it told the best story. I think it was the edgiest.
I'm going to give Hot Blooded a slight edge in it. I don't know why. I mean, but I could go either way with that. I mean, I really enjoyed both of those shows. Thought they were so well done. Again, written, produced, everything in-house by Kings Island's personnel. So, just showed off the talent that the park had, in terms of being able to write shows and cast shows and all those kind of things.
Yeah. Now, to be honest with you, I was on the fence about Hot Blooded or Dead Awakening for the one spot. Part of the reason why I chose Dead Awakening was the member berries. We're just like thinking about the show. It kind of brought back memories and stuff. Well, Hot Blooded is quite a bit more recent, although albeit a couple years now. But the other thing is, I feel like everybody's opinion is that Hot Blooded was the best show, but I don't think as many people were exposed to this one too. So again, check it out. Look it up on YouTube. Dead Awakening at Kings Island. It'll blow your mind as to what they used to pull off in the past. But I love haunt shows. I really hope that Nightwalkers is really good again this year. So I'm really excited to see that and to talk about the findings on the show once we have
it. Check it out. That's right.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Don, let's talk about some t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts. They've become very popular. You can get yours for just $22. They come in a Carolina blue color, any size that you need. We'll send you the QR code if you'll send us a message on X or message us here, if you're watching on YouTube, and we hope that you are. But you can reach out to us on our personal channels, whatever way you need to get in touch with us, and we'll get you that QR code. And once the transaction goes through, it only takes a matter of days to get your shirt. You'll love it. Very comfortable shirt.
Yeah, $22 including shipping. So it's a heck of a deal. We love to see them around. And you know what? We'll be right back with the listener questions. All right, first listener question. This is from Rick D. from Goshen, Ohio. He says, love the podcast. It's clear you guys have a lot of love for Kings Island. But do you feel like Kings Island has ever loved you back? In other words, do you believe the park genuinely cares about its guests beyond just making money? Well, that's a deep question.
That's a very deep question. Ryan, I'll let you answer that one. It sounds like that question was geared for you.
So I think it's a complicated relationship with Kings Island because I've gone a lot. Granted, like I'm getting older now, and not that I'm slowing down, but like more of life happens. So I'm more of like a one weekend day per week in the summer. When I like in 2014, I went like 116 times or something. That was before Winterfest. I love the park, and I don't ever want people to think that if I criticize the park, it's because I hate it or anything. When I criticize it, it's admittingly, it's often out of frustration, but also it's kind of like so ladies who are listening, all 5 of you, if you put on a dress and you asked your friend, does this make me look fat? And your friend said, no, you look good, even though it made you look terrible. Would they be a good friend? That's the way I see it. Does the park genuinely care about its guests? I think that the park does. I think that nobody would get to where they are in the industry without genuinely caring for the most part. But I also think that they're often put in positions where what the guests think is not the most important thing. We talk about the murder, we talk about that incredibly, but when it comes down to, hey, we only have a budget of $25,000 for new haunt stuff. Like, you got to do something, but this is what you get. Whether or not the guests get the best possible experience may be shelved as a result of that. And I don't necessarily. That's the thing. Like, if haunt stinks, it's not the entertainment team. It's not Mr. Coons. It's not any of those people. They work with what they work with, and you have to find a way to convince the corporate people that adding new stuff is important. Because if you look at Cedar Point, they cut the Midnight Express or whatever the band was called. I can't think. Midnight Syndicate. They cut that, but it looks like they added a lot of new stuff this year too. Granted, they have a lot of returning stuff or whatever, but you can't make the argument that Kings Island only won't add stuff for haunt, won't put money into haunt because they open their gates and people come anyway. Cedar Point's in the exact same boat. Nobody goes to Cedar Point because they got a new haunted house. So I think that we're running out of excuses for this whole thing, but I don't say that that's because of a lack of love for the park. Now, me personally, I think that some at the park may see me as like an adversarial person because of who I associate with that way. Or no, it's just, we've got a podcast. We talk about Kings Island exclusively. We've got a much bigger reach than we ever thought we would have after like a year. And they have zero control over that. And that's got to be super frustrating for them. I would feel the same way if I was them. I do not take that personally. But that's why, in a lot of ways, like when we critique stuff, we clarify. Yeah, Haunt's stupid this year, but you know what? The decor team did a great job. Entertainment did a great job. It's just there wasn't enough to it. So it's not an individual person. We don't ever want to use this podcast to attack individual people in that way who do not deserve it. You know what I mean? Don, does a park like you or not?
Well, let me answer your one question. You mentioned that, the following and that we've developed here, the Tower Topics, now they don't have control over it and they don't like it and everything. I think when you're in that situation, instead of resenting it, what you kind of got to do is you kind of say, how can we leverage that? Right. They're getting in front of all these people. What can we do to get our messages told through that platform? So that's my take on that part. But I'm thinking going to different parks and that this year. I think there's definitely a difference in, parks truly appreciating, the guests that are visiting and wanting to go out of their way to make sure you have a good day, or following up with you if they found out you were there to see what you liked and, maybe didn't like in that. So there's definitely, between all the parks I went to, they're all a little bit, different levels of which ones are real genuine with that kind of a thing. When you talk about, do they love you back? Are they glad to see you? Do they value your visit? Are you just a number on your ticket that day? Kind of a thing. So, but I think overall, having been on both sides of it before I started working there, I thought they definitely valued the guest. I thought they appreciated the guests working there. I knew that they did because everyone was passionate about it. A lot of turnover though, a lot of retirements and things in the past few years. You get different people coming in now, a little bit, younger people that didn't grow up at the park. It doesn't mean as much to them as some of the other people that had worked there for so long. So you get that a little bit. So I think maybe that creates some of that perception that they don't care about their guests because, like I said, it's their first or second year working in the industry. And so there's going to be a little bit of a different mindset there than there would have been, 20, 30 years ago, or even, 10 years ago. And there were people that were in their 30th, 40 years, working there that had a different way they looked at the park and looked at the guest and valued the guest than what you see today. So it's a different mindset, different kind of person that's coming in. I think that plays into a little bit perceptually. But overall, so I think what was your question? Do they care about me as a guest?
Yeah. Do they care about you, Don, as a guest?
I think they care that I would want to visit and come back. And I think they care about the kind of things that what their guests say. I don't care. It's not just me, but I think anybody that goes there, I think, they're attuned to what's being said on social media. It's not just at the park level, corporate level. I mean, they're monitoring all those kind of things. They're getting, they have to do reporting on what the sentiment is. So yeah, I think they care about, my visit and what I thought about it. I think they care about your visit, what you thought about, it. And anybody listening here, I think they care
Mm.
and care what your thoughts are. So yeah, I think they do.
Yeah. Now,
They just have an odd way of showing it sometimes, right?
yeah, it's tough love. Now, but one thing that comes to mind, because you've got a little bit more of an interpersonal relationship with some of the other parks we've worked with, mainly because you actually got and visit them. I don't. But I remember going out to the Friday Night Live thing on National Roller Coaster Day, and I ran into Leah Cook, and she. I mean, you'd think that she was on our podcast a couple times, but I'm sure she does that a lot. And they see 3 million guests or whatever per year. But she did recognize me. She came up. She said, "Hey, we're really excited because this is successful. I really appreciate you helping promote this. I like to think that it had something to do with this success, for their event and stuff." But I think that you and I drew that connection with her as a human being. I think that the Cooks and Matt Eckert and all those people there, they really do care, but it's almost like they care as much as a caring person cares about somebody who walks past them at the mall, where it's like they wish them well, but that's the extent of their knowledge of them. Now, with Kings Island, it's a corporate park, and it's more corporate now than it was 3 months ago. But the only thing that they've done that's kind of like made me doubt that like maybe they don't care about me and maybe they don't care about the guest is when they let people get away with saying things like, "Oh, their complaints are as adorable as they are predictable."
Right.
But here's the thing: under almost any administration, like if they have a vision and they're integrity and cleanliness and all their cornerstones and stuff, that violates like 4 of them. All right. So I feel like under almost all circumstances, that person would probably not last very long. Whoever said that, but I feel like they're in a situation now where, again, no accountability, and 2, there's just what can you do about it? We're going through a merger. This person's a jerk, and they clearly don't care about the guests, and they're talking down about the guests, and then they outed themselves on the fan site. So to me, that was and I've spent 20 years involved with the park, and through Paramount and through CBS and through Cedar Fair, now Six Flags and stuff. And I can't tell you, like, you and I had so many disagreements and stuff because you were the PR guy, I was a fan site guy. We both had our own interests in mind, but I never felt like the park didn't want me there. And that was the only time.
And the other thing about it was you don't have to like it, but you got to value the opinions and, okay, what can we do to make this better? And I can tell you that you look at the different social media channels out there, some of the parks that we've visited and have relationships and that with, and you can tell by the responses, on social media when someone asks questions and that if it's a canned response or if it's something that, they really appreciated the feedback, and we're really going to look into it. So there's a difference too with different parks in terms of how that goes as well too. And sometimes,
I completely agree. And it's, and I'm not here to accuse anybody of caring or not, because even if they don't, that's a fraction of a percent of the people that work day and night in the heat, in the cold, weekends, nights to put on this amusement park for you. And I'm extraordinarily appreciative of all of them. But that was the only thing that comes to mind where when I heard that and that whole story unraveled, where I really felt like because I've always heard rumors, and I understand where it's coming from, where it's like, oh, the season pass base is so entitled and stuff. It's like they beg you to buy a season pass from August until December, and then starting in January, you're a burden. And I always heard rumors of that, and I always thought, like, there's probably a little bit of that because they already have your money, but I've never seen like solid evidence of that. That's the first time I've ever seen anything where it's kind of like my opinion doesn't matter because I'm a loyal client. And I took that to heart, and that was like a year ago now. And I still, it still comes to mind, but again, that's one person. How they feel is irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And I think that if we were in any kind of different world whatsoever, that really, really would not have flown, especially under the management that Kings Island has now, or under Mr. Scheid, or Craig
Yeah.
Ross, or any
Well,
of
like I
those
said,
people.
now the difference too is, where so much of this stuff is being driven out of Charlotte, the corporate
Mm,
office, and the teams there, they're not on site. It's not, Kings Island isn't their park. They have Kings
right,
Island under as one of the parks, but it's not their park. They're not as invested in it, and you feel that sometimes, as a guest at the park, that there is that disconnect that wasn't there before. So the more corporate it becomes, the more you feel that, the more distant the guest is going to feel in terms of their connection to a
right.
park like Kings Island when it's run that way.
You know
Where
what comes to mind? I worked at McDonald's when I was 15. I didn't work with Kamala Harris. I get that a lot. But I worked at McDonald's, and somebody now, okay, now let me set the scene for you. McDonald's in a long time ago, I'm not going to out my age, even though most of you know my age, is similar to the McDonald's now, where it's like, oh, application, yeah, you're hired. When can you start? It's just, they just need people. That was my first job. And I remember somebody made the joke from Clerks where they were like, this job wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for all the dang customers. And I remember the manager knows what they've got. Like they're just to
yeah,
operate the place. And they were like, why would you say that? Like if the customers didn't come, you wouldn't have a job. Like I don't want you to have that mentality. Like you have to care at least like a little bit. And so, and at McDonald's, if they have that kind of accountability, I imagine something that, in my opinion, was far worse to be said, because I feel like it was genuine. Should have had a lot more accountability, but you know, it's out now and everybody knows about it. And when the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are.
yeah. You bring up you
William
worked at
Blake.
McDonald's. I worked at Chick-fil-A, and one of the things that made that experience special for me working at Chick-fil-A was that from the corporate office on down, they really felt it was important that no matter who you were there, if you were making that chicken sandwich or you were serving that chicken sandwich and the fries and that it mattered to you that the product was good and that
Yeah,
the person purchasing it was really going to enjoy that sandwich. So it was very hard at that time to get a job there. I mean, you had to be
it's
all in.
still hard to get a job there. You have
Yeah,
to,
and you
in
had
the interview, they ask you if you plan to work for Chick-fil-A for your entire career. And if you don't answer yes, they don't hire you.
yeah, it was very, but I mean, they wanted people that were going to be passionate about working at Eastgate Mall, Chick-fil-A there, as Truett Cathy was in the corporate office in Atlanta about all his stores. And that was drilled into me that, you have to love it. And if you love it, the guests are going to love it.
Right.
And the people that came into Chick-fil-A loved it because everyone there was happy. Everyone wanted to, it was that when they always use that word like my pleasure and stuff, when they're like serving you and things. And it was all genuine and stuff. So that always stuck with me in all the places that I worked with. That was the one place where, um, if you weren't going to be passionate about it and you didn't care as much as Truett Cathy did about the brand, you weren't going to last very long there.
Yeah. I mean, in my current role, one of the things that the upper management always repeats that I said, because I think it rang true with them, is to be really good at this job, you only have to care a little, because caring 2% is so much more than caring 0%. So it's kind of like, oh, they're complaining about this in the season pass holder group. Well, that's as adorable as it is predictable. If you only cared 2%, then you would stop and think like, well, wait a minute, maybe they have something that we should be concerned with, rather than just writing them off. Or,
Yeah.
Should we open both sides of the race? Well, that's a little bit more extreme. We're talking about a lot of money at that point, but let's use it as an example. Should we open both sides of the racer? I don't think anyone will notice if we open one side and then the other side. The stuff that they were doing for a little bit there, and it's like, well, the whole point of the race is a racing experience. I want people to have that. That's that little like 2% of caring. And I feel like that the vast majority of Kings Island associates, down to the people picking up trash, all the way up to Mr. Coons and so on.
No, they care.
They care very deeply about the experience and about the guests. But some people can get away with just not caring. They want it on their resume. They want to be loved. They want to be recognized. that sort of stuff. But I'm going to stop before I say too much. So let's go on to the next listener question.
Oh, we have another question. Okay.
Rick, I hope we answered your question. The next one's from Rhonda N. from Mason, Ohio. She said, Club Blood, Carnival, Trail of Terror, those were the days when Haunt was great. Do you think Kings Island will ever get back to that level? I'll still let you start, Don.
Well, I think that one of the good things, I think, was the merger with Six Flags, because it is more an elevated experience, a little more intense at the Six Flags parks nowadays than it was with the Cedar Fair parks, where, especially at Kings Island, where it kind of got tamed down. So I would think the more that corporate gets involved in planning these events, and if the people that were creating the Halloween events for the Six Flags parks are going to be retained and have a say about how it goes across the board, I think that would be encouraging for the future of Haunt to get back to that more elevated, scary, intense type of event. I think that a lot of it, is going to depend too on what the leadership, of the park looks like, down the road. You have to have someone that wants to push for that kind of stuff, wants it to be the absolute best, wants it to be the scariest in the Cincinnati area. You have to have that kind of thing going for you too. So I don't know. I think so. I think in time, though, it's going to it'll evolve back to something like that. Is if they involve the people that were creating these events for Six Flags are going to be doing it across the board. I think that's encouraging for the future. But yeah, you're right. Those were the days. Club Blood, and what was the other one? Trail of Terror was on there. Carnival was really good.
That was Oak Island Design, I think. John Hawkins, his company, that did Carnival, and that was the longest running haunt. Well, it might have been outdone by like Kilmar now, but they had that from 2000.
That was really well done. I like the scare actors there were good. The greeter at the front was amazing. I really like that one. I thought Club Blood was it definitely told you there's a difference between Fear Fest and the Halloween haunt levels, in terms of, being upgraded when that was introduced in 2007 with that one. I like that. Trail of Terror. I mean, it's tough to beat, in the woods with fog and that people chasing after you with a chainsaw. I mean, that's always fun to watch.
Yeah, somebody was telling me that they really wish the train one would come back, which I think would be a little bit logistically complicated with how the area has changed. But I think that they should do something with the train ride. While we're at it, they should probably do something better with the train ride during Winterfest too, because
yes,
I feel like that's a missed opportunity. But that's neither here nor there. So one of the ones, ask anybody that's like an old man like me or Don. One of their best haunts. You remember Curse of the Crypt?
Yeah.
Remember that one that was over? It was in the back of the games, but it was kind of where the parade floats are now, but it was
back behind the racer. Yeah, back there. Yeah, you crawled on the ground and stuff.
Yeah. And you'd crawl on the ground, it would light up, and somebody would be under there tapping on the glass and stuff. That was one of the best ones. Now, I did not attend Fear Fest in 2000, but I heard that was awesome. They had the haunt at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and then here's what's funny. So one of the things that they wanted to do was you take out one of the corrugated pieces of steel that were on the floor of the Eiffel Tower, like kind of like if you're watching on YouTube, the thing that's in the background, so that's modeled after, and then replace it with a piece of plexiglass. But I was talking to Bill Balfour, who was head of entertainment at the time, and he was telling me that was like going to be the basis of that haunt, but they needed permission from the manufacturer in accordance with the Ohio Department of Agriculture. And the manufacturer that was on record was the construction company. Because remember, Intamin brokered it; they didn't really build it. So the company that built it, essentially, from a legal standpoint, went out of business. So they couldn't do that. But one of the things they wanted to do was maybe have it so you walk into a dark area and then it lights up that you can see straight down, which would be horrifying. And then the other thing that they did was they had like live actors in Phantom Theater. If anyone has any memories of this stuff, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments down there. But they bought all that stuff. Apparently, it was very knee jerk to do Halloween. It was not super long time prepared, and they bought all of their stuff from this Madison Scare Gardens was the name of the haunted attraction where they bought almost all that stuff. But again, Rhonda, I apologize. I'm sure we answered your question somewhere in there. I think it'll come back too. I forgot to answer my side because I don't think that this stuff with haunt is intentional. I think it's just happening. I think that it's less scary because there's less people in Madame Fatale's. Well, there's less budget for people, and we don't have any new haunts this year. We got a scare zone. Well, they only got enough money for a scare zone. But with that being said, things run in cycles. So eventually the company it's not going to be a local thing. The company will be like, we need it to be the scariest or whatever, because there's a lot of competition. There's Land of Illusion. There's Dent Schoolhouse. Cincinnati is like the hub of haunted houses. So the rest of Ohio is too. So they'll eventually have to do something. But yeah. Okay, cool. Do you have any final thoughts on this? Because we've been doing listener questions for like an hour. All right. Hey, I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.